On this episode of the show, I have with me Mike Urban. He is Chief Technology Operations Officer at Best Egg. And we're going to be talking about enterprise Gen AI, but really we're going to be talking about change management, control and risk functions. We're going to be talking about how do you actually translate that excitement around, well, initiatives such as Gen AI to an action and plan. Risk controls are big advocates of Gen AI and these kind of advanced technologies. We're going to ask how their involvement's changing, because obviously change management is going to be one of the biggest components within this space. And I'm excited to have you on, Mike. Thank you for the time.
Oh, Amir, it's great to be on the podcast. Appreciate it and look forward to our conversation.
Absolutely. All right. Before we start, can you tell everyone what the company does?
Yeah, sure. So Best Egg, I've been here for about 11 years. We are in the fintech space. So our core customer is folks who are limited savings. And so they leverage financial products like the ones we offer to achieve their financial goals confidently. And so in a nutshell, that's what Best Egg does. And that's what we do.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. So this topic, obviously, we're going to be talking about change management in the context of enterprise Gen AI. I guess let's just talk about change management in general, right? Traditional change management already is hard. Like, I think it's one of the under discussed parts of technology implementation is change management. I guess talk to us a little bit about some of how change management is currently handled, and then we can talk about when we introduce enterprise Gen AI into the conversation.
Yeah, so when I think about change management in the holistic picture, to your point at the aggregate level, it's hard. I mean, change at the bottom of it is human behavior. And if you read a lot about human behavior, we're creatures of habits. So you get into a rhythm. And then when you disrupt that rhythm, it can be challenging for folks to understand why you're disrupting that. And so I would say at Best Egg, the way that we approach change is we do have a cross-functional group. It's a small group where we meet on a recurring basis, and we talk through what we think the biggest goals are of the business, what the biggest goals of our customer, what are the things that are impeding those progress, and how does change play a role when we're trying to activate or solve some of those problems that our customers or the business is having. I would say the one thing I think I've appreciated with our approach is just like change, our change management process is fluid too. It's almost like each individual change that you're going through as an organization, it's like meeting a unique person. And so you have to treat them that way. And you have to understand that there's not a one size fits all. There's common frameworks out there. But I'll tell you, and I have the similar mindset when it comes to Agile. It's like, hey, I read the Agile manifesto. I don't know anybody that actually does it by the book. Take slices of things that work for your culture and the problem you're looking to solve, and you create your own recipe. And so that's like at the highest level what I feel like a good, strong change management program looks like.
Absolutely. You know, something interesting, and I agree with you regarding Agile Scrum. I think there are processes, and obviously relating that process to what best fits an organization are two different things. I guess when we're thinking about change management, how often do we actually start with that first? How often do we actually go, you know what, before we start any of this stuff, let's not worry about the changes that'll actually happen. We already know what we're expecting to happen. Let's actually see how this fits. Because I know within software engineering, they love test-driven development. They want the test cases up front. Do we, or have you seen change management done before anything starts?
Yeah, I would say it, in being transparent and honest, I think it happens in pockets.
Yeah.
I think that you have scenarios that are brought up or problems that you want to solve that immediately top of mind becomes navigating this change. I'll use an example that we probably all have gone through is you're talking about doing some functional reorganization. If change management doesn't come to the top of everybody's mind at that particular topic, then there's a bit broader discussion we want to have. But there's certain examples or certain initiatives where it is top of mind. I think the challenge becomes really around those I'll call medium to low efforts that we think are medium to low, and realizing that actually some of those can arguably have even more impact and change is actually required for. So, do we get it perfect? No. Does everybody get it perfect? I don't think so. But I think the thing we do is we try and make it a part of our culture and something that we want to ensure that the benefits of doing change management is you give people you treat them like your customer, right? So you get insights from them. You can talk through what you think is going to come up. You can create the right output as you're navigating a change to the best of your ability to achieve the end goal you want, but also ensure that the folks that are coming along for the journey. And so I think being fluid with it is helpful. I think having some recurring dialogue on it so that it's sort of top of mind, so you can constantly sort of think about, hey, you know what? What's changing in the organization? Is there anything that we should put on our radar or we should make sure we're thinking about? And then the biggest thing is, learn from the little hiccups you have, right? So you have something that you put out there and maybe it gets out into the ether and it wasn't anything that we thought was going to be too impactful, but it turns out to be. And so you live on that and you say, let's gather feedback. What happened? What drove that? Where did we miss a signal that we could have engaged the change management sort of framework and group in a more effective way?
Absolutely. I like the way you articulated that as well. I think it depends the visibility and then change management does come to the forefront. And some of it is hard because obviously, if it's not clear to go and actually focus on change management and actually implement change management isn't easy. And I think when you're talking about something as impactful as a functional reorganization, then you could see where those pieces move. We can draw some of the dotted lines and there's some clarity. I think the harder something is, maybe it's just more difficult. When it comes to something like Gen AI, where a lot of companies are just in the midst of, I want to build the muscle memory in this, I want to build some competency, but yet we're running around with some POCs and we're trying to put these things into production and we're trying to also be mindful of change management. That does not seem like it falls under the clear category.
Yeah. So Gen AI in itself brings up a number of different core components of change that you have to navigate it all at once. And then there's some outside factors that come into play when you're dealing with any emergent technology. We're talking about Gen AI today, but any emergent technology. And outside of the normal change management that you have to do, you also have to realize that there's a fair amount of deviation and scope and distance between people's level of comfort and level of education about Gen AI as a technology in general. I'm in the technology space. I've been in it for more than I'd probably want to admit to. The reality is Gen AI has been out there. This has been the most recent iteration. We've been doing machine learning at Best Egg for 10 years, ever since the adoption. The early frameworks go back even further than that have got us to this point now where the infrastructure allows us to uh, activate this technology that's been out there on a individual user perspective at scale. And so, I think the thing with Gen AI for me and what we've done at Best Egg is like you have to take all those bits and pieces together and really understand that you have a broad group of individuals that are in varying degrees along their journey when it comes to Gen AI. And you really have to create a program that kind of meets almost all of them. And I have this analogy that I'll share with you is, over the past few months, I think I've realized that as we've been on our journey, it's like a light switch, and every single individual has different parameters to turn their Gen AI light switch on. And so when we go into it with that approach, it allows us to be a lot more personal and make sure that we're meeting them where they're at. They have the understanding, they have the groundwork, and then once you get their light switch on, it never turns off. It just never turns off. And so that's a little bit about it. We can dive into more details on it and sort of how our program has worked at Best Egg, but hopefully that answers the question. But that's sort of how I think about it, particularly with Gen AI.
Absolutely. I guess you'd mentioned when it comes to, control and risk functions, you mentioned that they are actually big advocates of new technologies and especially Gen AI. I'd love to kind of get a little bit insights into that.
Yeah, so here's the thing, and here's one of the things that I found out early in my career is, risk and control is not there to tell us no. In my perspective, they're actually there to tell us where you can grow. And so they're helping us create the guardrails and the playground that we can play in. And so as we started to embark on this Gen AI journey at Best Egg, about 18 months ago, they were at the forefront. And so some of the early things we did from a, perspective was we built a senior leader executive council. And it was representation from not only all the different functional areas, risk and control was included, and they were at the forefront. And some of the early things we did were to create that playground that we felt comfortable as a financial institution starting to leverage Gen AI. And so we did things like, hey, we probably should have an update to our acceptable use policy. Let's make sure we have some language around our NDAs and our contracts. And we actually got some kudos from vendors saying, you're one of the first companies we saw language around Gen AI use and the data that Gen AI is using. And so like that gave us some good confidence. And again, I keep saying it, that playground that let folks understand how we can leverage this tool and feel confident and safe that we're doing it to protect our customer and protect the company.
Interesting. It's interesting that when you mentioned obviously the long concern around control and risk was they are there to be an obstacle, and I think as you kind of articulated, they're not actually there to be the obstacle. They're there to remove all the dead bodies that you will run into down the road. But obviously, there's a lot of different workflows and hoops you need to get through. So that is something that people don't necessarily enjoy. When you're looking at technology such as a generative technology that could come in and actually help with policies and procedures on the risk and control side, is that something you kind of foresee coming in and helping risk and control professionals and some of the battles that they have to fight?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're spot on, Amir. Like, that's again a little bit of that personalized light switch that you're turning on for individuals. And so, as we step through our program, after we got some of the playground defined, we wanted to increase our engagement. We want to increase our education. We want to make sure that business had an understanding of what Gen AI is, what it isn't, and what power and value we think we can unlock and where we should start. And so we started more broadly. We had, we decided to move forward with an enterprise ChatGPT pilot with a subset of licenses that we bought, and that's what we're navigating through this year. And we had education with our senior leaders, our executive leaders. We had hackathons that we did with folks in the organization that were becoming like advocates. They were grassroots, like just as excited about Gen AI as I am, and they're just living and breathing it. And then what we did is we used those as advocates, but then we also said, hey, we got to dive deeper. We got to talk to each of these functional areas, and we need to bring it to them in the way that they understand how tooling can help them or how they actually work. And so I will tell you, I have a lady that works for me who leads day-to-day transformation for me across the organization, and she had this great idea. And the great idea was, hey, one of the hurdles that we see is correlating it to someone's job, and they have this immediate reaction of the impact it's going to have. And so what we did is we did this pilot with our global risk and control team on one of their on-sites, and we basically gamified it. And the gamification was we gave them examples or use cases on a personal level and asked them to use ChatGPT to help them solve it. It was things like, hey, go create a recipe for a barbecue that you're going to attend next weekend. Find an image and see if you can tweak it to do something different. And so there was a host of them. And they had points if they did it and then they give it back. And so it was such a huge unlock because it took that mental block of like, AI's coming to take my job, like, oh my gosh, like what's going to happen? And it was like, it was light bulbs going on and off, or light bulbs going off throughout the whole session. And so we ended the session with like, hey, now that you've had a chance to play with this, and some of the room had already been some of our advocates, what do you think's next? And we have dozens of people are raising their hand and saying, oh my gosh, it could help me do this on my day-to-day job. It could help me do this. I think I could be more effective here, and it'll free me up to do things that I'm not able to get to today. And so it was just amazing to do that. And we're carrying that forward with each functional area. So we just remember with these major changes in emerging technologies, we have to meet the people and the areas where they're at and realize that there's a comfort level that they have to get to.
I will I'll date myself, but when the typewriter was being replaced by the keyboard, no one ever said, "Oh God, I'm going to miss using correction tape." But it took a while, and I think that's I think as you said, as humans, we love habits, we love routines. There's probably I'm not a biologist or psychologist. I'm sure there's a reptile brain component in there of us wanting not to use energy to learn something new. And I guess what's interesting that you mentioned is people actually the light bulb moment of going, oh, this can actually help me be better. That light bulb moment, so it does take time, right? And I think maybe what we see right now is a lot of people that do get exposure with ChatGPT or Claude or something similar, where they're like, oh, well, I can just go prompt it and it kicks this out. Why is my work going to need months to do something very trivial? How do you translate that excitement of, hey, this is going to help me to actually, well, for us to get a solution to you might not be A, as easy, and B, priority wise, it might have to, it's expensive. So we might have to reconfigure that priority. I mean, how do you handle that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I think about it is I really truly believe that I want every individual at Best Egg to have all the right tools in their tool belt to do the job the best of their ability. But the reality is, it's that individual that we've hired for that role that is the biggest value enabler for the business. And so for me, listen, I use Gen AI all the time on a daily basis, both work and personal. And I will tell you, do I get value from it? Yes, I absolutely love it. I'm an efficiency guru and it really helps, but I think about it as a thought partner. Now, for the mundane, trivial task, it is absolutely a must do for those. And I think I have not gotten any pushback on that. If it's like repetitive tasks, people are all bored on that. But the pieces where I think people get a little bit squirrely about is it's like, well, can it just do everything that I do? And it's like, no, I don't want people to think about it that way. I want it to think about it as your thought partner and a tool that allows you to synthesize so much more data in such a quicker fashion that allows you, as the person in that role, to make the best business decision for the things that you're responsible for. And so I think when we talk to people like that, and then they start to get a taste of it, or their light switch turns off, back to what we were talking about, it changes their perspective on how they use that tool. Now, listen, I don't know what the future is going to bring for Gen AI. It's amazing. It's going to be, I'm sure, great. I don't think anybody actually knows where it's going to ultimately end, but we've had a lot of emergent tools. I mean, you bring up the keyboard, you bring up the internet, you bring up work productivity tools like Jira, moving away from these mundane tools we have before to more async. Like there's just so much innovation, and it's like, so for me, I think that's how I distill it. I hope I'm not answering the question. I'm answering the question for you, but like at the end of the day, I want every individual at Best Egg to have a tool belt on, and they have all the tools that they need in that belt to do the job the best of their ability.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's where, yeah, and we don't know, right? I think there is a lot of question around where Gen AI is going to fit. I think everyone just says it's going to make a big change. And I think there's changes that we can see and changes we can't see. And I think it goes back to the change management discussion. I think I asked you originally, one of the first questions was, should you start with it with the end in mind? I think we're at a kind of a bit of an inflection point with generative technologies where it's like, well, it's changing so quickly, and B, I'm not sure where it's going to land. So change management's hard with those two different components in mind of, both it's a technology that's just evolving from one day to the next. And also, I don't know what that impact is downstream. Change management, that becomes tougher, I feel.
Yeah, I would agree. The interesting thing is, and I'm not a behavioral science or biologist either. I will say that I think there is something to the fact that I believe a larger portion of people or the percentage is increasing when it comes to Gen AI and the speed at which it's iterating on that I think people are actually getting comfortable with. Because listen, again, we're creatures of habit. And if the habit is that it is going to continue to evolve, I think us as humans can get comfortable around something that's constantly evolving. I think it's we get uncomfortable when it's like, hey, I'm used to doing X, Y, and Z. It's been that way for months, years, weeks, decades, and then it changes, and then
Mhm.
I have to adapt. But if something is constantly evolving, I feel like as humans, we can wrap our head around like, well, that's just how it works. It's going to constantly evolve. And so I think that's a little bit of where we're at with Gen AI. It's like, hey, it's continuing to evolve. I'm comfortable with its evolving, but I'm using it and I'm getting comfortable with it and I'm evolving with it.
I like that. I think that's fair assessments of how humans need to kind of approach these type of shifts. It's funny because I mentioned a lot of times that when we saw the shift to the cloud, I don't think the end consumer really cared, the end stakeholder. I mean, whether you're on one platform or another, yes, it made life easy. Yes, it innovated other things, but they really didn't care. They just needed whatever they wanted, done. And I think that was more of a technology, coming to grips with some of the skills needed. This, I think, is more of a end user impact along with technology, which does make it a little bit hard. So it'll be interesting, and I'm always like, these things we got to come back and revisit in a year or two because it'll be interesting as we talk about this stuff, and in 6 months, a year when the next version of the LLMs come out and they can do more, and we'll be talking about, well, what we thought we could do and how quickly we could do it. Those are definitely no longer relevant. So it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. It's an evolving, I mean, you see it evolving all the time. I mean, I've already seen significant progress on some of the things 3 to 6 months ago that were challenges. Like for us, top of mind was, listen, we have a bunch of other tool sets, and some of the players in the space, their integration library is not as deep as you want. I'm seeing reaction to the market that already. I think the other thing that I'm pretty excited about that I think could also help with the change management around Gen AI is listen, there's all different models out there. I play with all of them. You mentioned them, OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini. Like I'm constantly playing with all these models. The one thing that I will tell you is a constant battle in my brain is which model to use for which particular prompt. I'm starting to see some progress for some players in the space that are like, hey, why don't we just take the prompt you're asking and we'll figure out what the right model is to send it to you? And so, like, it's just fun to see this immense iteration happening with this particular technology.
I like it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that those are all great points. And um, before you get too comfortable, I'm sure it'll be changed in the next week anyway. So all part of the change management, even within ourselves. Um, Definitely was going to say, thank you for coming on, Mike, and taking the time with us and sharing your thoughts. If somebody does want to reach out to you to ask you about change management, what's a good way of doing that?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn. So please don't hesitate to reach out. Send me a direct message through LinkedIn and we can chat. I love talking about it. Thanks again for being a guest. Hopefully we can continue the conversation in a future episode. Um, but this has been great. This has been great.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for your time. That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. Please share this episode with somebody that wants to hear about change management because I really do think we don't hear and speak about it enough when it comes to, well, general shifts within an organization, but when it does come to enterprise and Gen AI, I think those are areas that we need to talk about a little bit more. And I think Mike did a great job of walking us through some of how he sees it, some of how Best Tech handles it. We talked a little bit about control and risk of those functions and their involvement within the process. And I think there's some great insights. So please share this episode out. That'd be awesome. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the show's going for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.